Hi, I'm rickdior, and today we're going to do the last part of this series, which is basic hand technique. Now we're not so basic anymore because we're talking about closed rolls. These can be called a lot of things. They can be called the press roll, the orchestral roll, like I said, the closed roll, the buzz roll, all kinds of things. But basically, it's a buzz stroke, and you don't hear individual strokes. So where a double stroke roll would sound like this, you're hearing all those strokes in 30-second notes. With a closed roll or buzz roll, you're just hearing the buzzes. So you're not hearing, once again, individual strokes. Now the equipment I'm going to be using today is this. This is a Ludwig concert snare drum. You see the concert snares there. So this drum's a little more difficult to play on than a regular drum set snare drum. I have one of those here. This is a Pearl Marvin Smitty Smith drum, a really nice drum. It's made of copper. And these are curly snares. So this is what most of you have on your drum set. I'll be putting this up here in a minute so you can hear the comparison. But these drums with curly snares, it's a lot easier to play buzz rolls on those because they're constantly in action, vibrating. But I'm going to use this concert snare today because this is what I normally use in the orchestra. And you will also find yourself playing lots of buzz rolls if you play jazz, different kinds of things on the drum set, Brazilian music, second line kind of music. There's lots of buzz rolls. So you definitely have to be well versed in this. And it's amazing to me how many drummers or percussionists cannot play a nice closed roll. It is one of the most difficult things to do, but it's so important. And sometimes when people go to do it, you know, when you hear that person play the Star Spangled Banner, we'll take this off for a minute, you know, the conductor points to you and you go. And then they start the banner. That's your first moment if you don't have a good closed roll. That's probably going to be a tough day in your life because you're all alone there, sometimes for a while the conductor gets up to the stage and gets ready and gets everybody to start. So normally that's one player. Sometimes you'll do it with two. So those kinds of things, those long rolls, if you ever play a circus gig, I did some of those when I lived in New York. Lots of long rolls there while the elephants did their thing. So the sticks I'm going to be using are as follows. You heard me start with this reverse tip stick. That's what these look like. Hopefully the camera's capturing this. And this is a stick that I make. These are Tigerwood. I have several different versions of the stick I'll use today. This is Leopardwood. These are a little heavier and thicker. And I'm going to put this muffling back on here because this drum does need to be muffled a little bit in this small room. Also, I'll be using a set of Persimmon Reverse Tip. These are longer tips, so. As well as the stick you've seen me using in most of the other videos in this series, which is a Leopardwood stick with a medium barrel tip. In many ways, the barrel tip is my favorite all-round stick because you can do nice rolls with it. It's also extremely articulate. I remember the first time using a pair of these kinds of sticks after I'd made them many, many years ago. It was a revelation, really, because before that I'd been using a long tip, like a diamond tip or teardrop, some people call them. You see there, I made these. These are also Tigerwood, and they're fine. And they're really nice on rolls, but when you have to play articulate things. sometimes they're not as articulate as a barrel tip. So I'm not sure you can hear the difference, but I feel and hear the difference. And finally, my drum set stick, which I'll use on the Smitty Smith drum. Not your best choice for orchestra drumming because the tips are so small, but you can still play a pretty nice closed roll. For that, you might want a little bit of a bigger tip. Okay, so that's what I'll be using. So the first thing you want to understand when you're doing these rolls for the first time and working on them is you have to get a good buzz with the stick. So you press into the head, and what you're going to try to avoid is this. Now please don't stick your fingers out like I showed you in that Bad Habits video in this series. Don't do this, because you're going to need those fingers when you start playing the roll to move. Now I play both match grip and traditional. I will switch back and forth regularly for different things. Both grips are great for playing, obviously, drum set or orchestral percussion. So don't let anyone tell you otherwise. So those buzzes with the left hand with the traditional grip is a little more difficult. You have to apply pressure from your thumb. And when you do that, these two fingers will really come off the stick just about half an inch. Don't do this where you're splaying them out, because then you won't be able to get them back in time. So there you see how I'm basically getting them off the stick there just like 1/8 of an inch. All right, so that's how you do that. So again, it's thumb pressure, not wrist like this. If you try to do that, it sounds like this. All right, that's why you're getting that bad kind of buzz, because you're trying to use your whole wrist instead of letting the stick move freely within your hand like that. Now for the match grip, it's a little bit easier. So you grip the stick here, like I said in that first video of this series, the basic hand technique video. You need to have a space there so your fingers can move. Now, I am a little more comfortable playing this kind of stuff traditional because up until the age of about 17, I played everything on the snare drum traditional grip. And then I switched and started using matched as well. But, you know, whatever grip you start with, that's going to be the grip you're always the most comfortable with. So the next step in this, after you're working on your buzzes like that, is to try to put them together. Now you're probably noticing from this overhead view that I'm pulling back a little. That's a good thing to do when you start out, to travel that stick. Not too much, don't do this, but just a little bit, a couple inches. And don't expect a clean row for quite a while. This is difficult stuff. There's a good section in the first Joe Morello book with buzz studies where he's doing like... That's a great study you might want to do. The other thing you can work on in my books is just take the rhythms in my drum set book on page 7, in the 3 Camps book, page 48, and buzz those rhythms as you're playing 16, so it would sound like this. You could even do it with one hand. It's much, much more difficult, but again, it's a good exercise to get you buzzing. And it takes quite a bit of strength and a good grip there, okay? Not tight, but firm to get that buzz. Again, you don't want individual strokes. You want a buzz. So after you work on some of those exercises and you get that, we need to talk about baseline studies. So in other words, a rhythmic baseline that you're doing, and then you're buzzing on top of that. So this is going to vary, obviously, depending on tempo and passage that you're playing, the passage that you're playing. So let's say we just take 16th notes, and we're doing it at, let's say, 100. So now again, that's not going to sound like this yet, because you're taking a rhythmic value and you're practicing buzzing within that value. We can try triplets, which is going to be even, slower, obviously. All right, so those rhythmic baseline studies, by baseline studies, it's the basis of that rhythm, all right, which could be sixteenths, triplets, groups of 5, and all that. There's a great book, if you could find it, I'm not sure it's still in print, but I think it's Emil Scholl, you might say it. It's called The Roll. I'll see if I can find it online and put a picture up here. That's a book that I used when I was young and in college to work on my roll. And it was great. It has all groups of 5 and triplets and all that. There's other books that do that too. But you don't necessarily need a book to do that. You just need to come up with different rhythms and play those rolls, those buzzes underneath. Then you want to pick up like a book. Some of the Mitchell Peters intermediate snare drum books are good, the Garwood Whaley books. Cerrone Portraits in Rhythm, which is a little bit more difficult. That's got tons of roll studies in there. So there's lots of books like this that you can get. If you're a beginner, you might want to pick up the Alfred's Methods, Volume 1 and 2 for snare drum. That's got some good roll studies as well. There's many, many books. It's no secret how to do this. You just have to do it in a kind of logical manner. So far, we've done the buzz with each hand. And then we've had the baseline studies. The next thing I teach is dynamic studies, and these are pretty complicated, and they cannot be taught until the player has, a somewhat developed roll. So for these, you're doing crescendos and decrescendos, you're doing forte pianos, those kinds of dynamics. So a forte piano is when you hit the drum and then you come down. So that would look like this. And sometimes you crescendo, sometimes you stay down. The next thing is that you should practice are the soft rolls, which are the hardest thing to play. So those dynamic things are really, really important. But once again, if you're teaching this stuff to students, you don't want to teach that until they can get a pretty decent buzz roll. Now, getting a decent buzz roll can take years and years. And every day it's a little different too. Some days it's great, some days not. Now, this is a pretty dry room I'm in, so you don't have the effect of the hall, the assistance of the hall. So everything you do is under a microscope. I would suggest practicing in a very dry room. So then if you could do that and sound good, once you get in a hall, it's going to sound great. Also, do not practice this stuff on a pad all the time. You can sometimes, for sure, if you don't want to annoy everybody, but it's completely different on a pad than it is on a drum. And your dynamics will get skewed where you'll think everything's soft, but it's really too loud. When you play softly on a snare drum in a hall, it's got to be just so soft. So barely heard. And no matter what you do, the conductor will always give you the hand. I think they're trained to do that when they study conducting. Now we'll switch to a barrel tip stick so you can hear that. The final step after you do all this is to do some different styles. So here's where I'll put the Smitty Smith drum on. Put this down here. So like I said earlier, a concert snare drum varies greatly from a drum set drum, mainly because of the snares. And actually, if you're interested, I've done a video recently where I made a dial-tuned snare drum into a concert snare by switching the snares, so you can really hear that there. You might want to search for that. So this drum is a really nice sounding drum, to me anyway. But it's a drum set drum, and you're not going to get that same articulation you are with the snare set up and the multiple snares that you're on a concert drum. Now this drum's tuned kind of low right now because I'm using it for a session later on today, and I was tuning it before I started this video. It's got a very thin head on here, a Diplomat. Normally I use an Ambassador, but I'm playing a lot of brushes today on this session, so it's probably going to be about 80% brushes. So I'm going to use this drum, which sounds great with brushes. So I have that tuned, and I just had it here, so I'm just sticking it up here so you can hear it. Now the snares generally with these kinds of curly snares are going to sound much looser than an orchestra drum, no matter what you do. And you don't want to tighten it too much, you'll choke it. If I tighten them up a little, it sounds like this. And to me that feels choked, so I'll loosen it up again. All right, just a bunch of different buzz strokes, little Brazilian stuff, little second line stuff. So that is what the curly snares sound like. And we'll put this back up here. Now, as far as tensioning on the drum and tuning, I normally tune my concert drums to an A, anywhere between a G and an A natural. On the top, I use thin heads. This is a Diplomat thickness, which is thin. All right, and on the bottom, I put a hazy Remo Diplomat, which is the thinnest head you can get, I think. So let's just recap real quick. So first step is you do buzzes, right? You're applying pressure, and you're getting the fingers off the stick at first, but then right back on. Don't hold them out like that, all right? Make sure there's a space there so you got some place to move. With the traditional grip, you're using mostly thumb. And you're lifting these two fingers off the stick about, depending on how fast you're playing. But if you're just doing the buzzes, about ½ an inch. Now these bottom fingers, I might not have mentioned this before, they're also going to come off the stick. The main thing to remember is that stick needs to move freely. If you're doing this, you're not going to get a long buzz. The longer the buzz, the better the roll, the smoother the roll. And short rolls, basically you're just getting an underlying rhythm. So if I did this, see how I'm doing that? So different bass line rhythms, 16ths, triplets, whatever, and then you buzz all those and you can get a thicker roll, faster roll, or a slower roll. But the goal is to get them smooth. And finally, dynamic practicing. Practice really soft, really loud, and forte pianos. You can do those quicker or longer. And then crescendo. So I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope this answered some of your questions about how to develop your closed roll. I'll just play a little, and we'll call it a day.